Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Co-Worshop Day, part of the incubating program of the Global Startup Academy. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Seo Misorang. You can call me Natasha. And it's an absolute honor and delight to be serving as your MC this afternoon. 인사드리겠습니다. 저는 오늘 행사의 진행을 맡은 서미소랑입니다. 반갑습니다. Thank you very much. Now, as I mentioned earlier, during the conference session of this afternoon's entire program, there are five presentations from 5 accelerators. And there is a break in between after the third presentation for 20 minutes. And during this 20-minute break, you can enjoy the refreshments that you, I'm sure, no doubt saw on your way in, but also of a greater importance is that there is a lucky draw event during this 20-minute break. I'm sure you guys would have put in the numbers as you came into the lucky draw box. Yeah, so we're going to select 3 lucky people to take home prizes this afternoon, so please stick around for that as well. All right, let's begin with the presentations. The first presentation will be delivered by Jonathan, the CEO of Founder Institute. His presentation is titled The Rule of One and the Importance of Going Global. He's joining us via Zoom. Jonathan?
Hey everybody, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you clearly, so the floor is yours.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I just want to thank you all for having me. I'm piping in today from Colorado here in the United States. Wish I was there. It looks like fun. Looks like you guys were having a nice dance party there before we got started, at least from what I could hear. So just as an introduction, my name is Jonathan Greechan, co-founder and CEO of the Founder Institute. The Founder Institute is the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator. We've helped launch almost 7,000 companies now. Since 2009, those companies have raised nearly $2 billion in funding and are scattered across over 200 cities and 6 continents around the world. So before I do get started, to give some of the tips that I've learned now in working with thousands of startups in my career, which is now almost reaching 20 years in startups, which probably explains some of the gray hairs that I have here. I do want to say a thank you to KISED and for everybody else that's participating and supporting what we're doing at the Founder Institute. We're helping some really great founders through the KISED FI Korea program. Erding and Yuli from the Founder Institute Japan team that have helped to bring the Founder Institute to Korea are doing an amazing job, and we hope to continue this partnership. But let's get down to business. So I've worked now with, I don't know, probably 10 to 20,000 entrepreneurs building startups across a lot of different stages now for 20 years almost, across all kinds of markets and across all kinds of economic environments. And you know, if I ask myself the question, it's really just how can a startup get to the point where they can initially grow and scale? How can they get to this exit velocity, so to speak, where they can be successful? Because if you think about it, the playing field, everything is stacked against you as a startup, all right? You know, not least of which are all of the traditional big companies that you would be going against as you're trying to build this fledgling business. And really, there are a million advantages that a big company will have against a startup, and there's only 2 advantages that a startup has against big businesses. The first advantage is the ability to focus on a niche, all right? A big company has a fiduciary responsibility. They have shareholders. Moving something 1 or 2% in any given direction is not going to do a good enough job to appease their shareholders. They need to build products that will serve very large audiences. And what usually that means is that they build sufficient products for a lot of different people, which leaves open a gap for startups to create products that are perfect, right? If you're trying to create products like a big company that will serve huge markets, that means that yes, it's okay, decent for a lot of people, but not perfect product for any one given customer or any one given customer segment. And this is where startups can really come in and attack big businesses in a place where they can't compete, right? As a startup, you don't have a fiduciary responsibility. You can build a product for any small number or for any audience that is of a small number. And by creating these perfect solutions to overlooked problems, startups drive this critical organic growth, right? They build communities that refer people. They build communities that allow you to grow in a way that you don't have to be spending money to do so. And that is something that is critical for startups and something that honestly big companies, they try and they consistently fail to replicate. Now, the second advantage that a startup has over a big company is speed, right? And any big company, it's bureaucracy, and they've tried everything, right? They're trying flat structures, they're trying all different kinds of structures to try to make things less bureaucratic. But it's just human nature, and any organization that's large is going to be really, really slow. Whereas with the small company, you have this ignorance and you can just move really, really quickly. And what I like to say is that a big company, even if they're doing a really good job at being innovative and moving fast, their learning curve is just going to be on a nice, steady increase, right? Whereas a startup without the bureaucracy in the beginning, they're not going to be learning very much, but they can have essentially this compounded learning curve, right? It's kind of similar to the concept of compounded interest, right? It's your ability to just move really, really quickly, to run experiments, to test, figure out very quickly if you succeed or fail. Whether you succeed or fail, you then internalize that learning, and then your next test starts at a higher base of learning, and you just continue that cycle over and over. You can move quickly, and you could just learn so much faster about all of the problems that your customers have, all of the opportunities in the market that you're serving at a rate that a traditional big company could never replicate. All right. Now, there's one big mistake that startups make that basically negates these only two advantages that they have over big companies. And to put it simply, it's a lack of focus. All right. And I believe very strongly about this. And this is one of the reasons why we started the Founder Institute. And what a lot of our curriculum and company building process is really about is giving people sufficient focus to build their companies in a way that provides them the best chance of success. In my opinion, a lack of focus is the number one startup killer. And at the end of the day, it's being unfocused is exponentially worse than being wrong, right? If you're wrong and you learn that quickly, then you can feed that into your ability to have this compounding learning curve. But if you are unfocused and you're not learning quickly, you're trying a lot of different things, you're not internalized the learning, and essentially before you know it, you become what we call a zombie startup, right? It's a startup that is already dead, but they just don't know it yet. So how can a startup be truly focused? I know it's a pretty basic term, oh, be focused. Oh, I am focused, right? But the framework that we give to people is the rule of one. It's in order to be sufficiently focused as a startup, and this goes for startups at the idea stage. It also goes to startups, I'd say, until they really reach about Series A or so, where they're trying to find the right product market fit that will give them that organic engine of growth that they need to reach that escape velocity, is that they need to be solving one problem for one customer with one product that has one killer feature and one revenue stream. All right, that's the rule of one. And maybe it sounds simple, but it's really, really hard to do in practice. So, I only have a couple of minutes left here, so I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. But at the end of the day, the business has to be solving a problem. And where I see a lot of people trip up is that they start with the idea of a product, but your product has to be solving a problem, because people don't buy products, they buy solutions to problems, and not just problems, meaningful problems that they have and that actually are impacting them in some significant way, shape, or form. So if you're starting to build out your business, and when you're talking about your problem to potential customers, or you're showing them your product or whatever it is, if you're not getting a visceral reaction from them when you're starting to describe that problem, then you're probably not there yet. Okay, you don't understand the problem well enough. Maybe you're targeting the wrong customer. You sort of have the wrong customer and problem mix. Your problem is maybe just not worth solving, or you're not speaking the customer's language. And I think language is something that is extremely overlooked. And when I say speaking the customer's language, I don't mean literal language. I mean that in order for you to really have that product market fit, you need to be describing the problem to a customer in the same way that they describe it to themselves, right? And I love this quote from Charles Kettering, who's one of the greatest inventors in US history. And he says that a problem well stated is a problem half solved. Understanding the problem, stating it correctly, speaking in the same language that your customer has internally in their head, and when they're thinking and talking about the problem, is half of the battle, right? And actually figuring out what the problem is. Then you need to figure out, okay, you have this problem. Who's the exact customer that has that problem? And we always tell people to focus on one customer, and then usually the pushback that we get is, hey, but I want to think big, right? I feel like if you're telling me to focus on one customer, you're inhibiting sort of the ambition that I have to change the world with this product. And we're certainly not trying to tell people to not try to change the world, but in reality, all the big businesses started niche, right? Amazon started for hard to find books. It was a perfect market for them to start with because hard to find books, in the times when the internet was just coming up, that was the perfect kind of problem for the internet to solve, right? Rather than somebody having to call around and travel to weird bookstores, it was just, hey, let's use the internet to solve this problem, right? The Facebook, it started at a dorm, right? One dorm at Harvard. I think all of you have probably heard a lot of these stories, but I feel like it always gets lost in the mix, right? These businesses, their visions to really get big and huge, those visions really only started after they reached some of this initial traction by focusing on a niche market and building a community. And if you start niche and then you build essentially playbooks, right? So you start at one dorm, you start at one city, start at one market, then you build playbooks to then expand based off the demand, right? And whether it's tackling countries or cities or what have you, that's how smart businesses grow, and that's how smart communities, or that's how very passionate communities grow as well. So this one is a pretty quick one, right? You solve one problem for one customer, and you have to do it with one product. And I think this gets also to the point where entrepreneurs are ambitious, right? I get it. But a lot of the time, we'll see entrepreneurs in the very early stages, and because they haven't really quite figured out the one great product to focus on, they start talking about a whole suite of products or a whole family products. I'm going to create a lifestyle brand, right? I promise you, there are probably some of you in the audience who've used some of these terms. And if you have, you're trying to cheat, okay? Try to focus on one product. It is hard enough to create one product that solves a problem for a customer and that they're willing to pay to solve. So trying to create multiple at the same time is almost always a surefire solution or a surefire way to fail. And of course, with all of the tools out there today, you can validate the customer demand for every product and feature before you spend the time to build it. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give people here is that surveys don't count. All right, there is no excuse for you to not actually present your potential customers with your product, right? Whether it's just by interviewing them or creating MVPs, and this isn't even bringing into play all of the AI tools that there are now, right? Surveys, people don't know what they want. You have to actually show them how you're solving their problem to elicit a good response from them, to elicit a response or feedback that's actually valid, right? Once you have the product, you have to have one killer features. It's a common fallacy that people say that consumers want choice. Consumers don't want choice. Consumers want freedom of choice. All right. They make a lot of choices every day. With your product, if you can give them freedom of choice, if you can give them something that's so simple and it doesn't have 1,000 features, it just solves the one problem that they have, it describes it perfectly, and it solves it quickly and efficiently, that is infinitely better than 100 adequate features. And this is a way that I see startups become zombie startups as well a lot, is because if they haven't found that one killer feature, so they just start adding on all these features, right? And just very, very quickly overwhelming their customers because they haven't figured out that right mix of the product and killer feature. And it just, you'll become a zombie startup. And it's a really, really, really easy trap to fall into. And then finally, with one revenue stream, right? Gone are the days, I think, in the current funding market and just where we are now in technology, where you're going to see a lot of companies starting, with no revenue stream. And we get this pushback a lot. It's like, oh, well, this company did it. This company did it. Well, yeah, well, Brad here also won the lottery, right? Doesn't mean that it's a good strategy for wealth building. When you are building out that revenue stream, the other thing that I see a lot is people think that the more creative the revenue stream is, the better. And it's actually the opposite. All right. The best revenue streams are simple. I give you a product, you pay me money. Or a variation of this, right? Investors love subscriptions because it's basically this transaction, but you agree to do it every single month or every year or whatever over time, right? Simplicity works. There are plenty of places for you to be creative when you're building a business, and I don't think revenue model is a good place to do that. And it's a place where I see a lot of entrepreneurs try to use a lot of their creative energy, saying, oh, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to get a kickback over here, and then this person's going to want to get exposure and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, keep it simple. Deliver a product for somebody, collect money from them, and if you can, turn it into a subscription so you can get that revenue over time. So that's the rule of one. And let me quickly talk about the process, all right? Because in the beginning, the first thing that you're going to want to do is figure out the problem and customer, right? What is the problem that you're solving and who is the exact customer that you're solving it for? That's the first pair. Then the second pair is, okay, I figured out the problem and the customer. Now I need to create the product and the killer feature that solves that problem for that customer, right? That's the next pair. And you need to do these sequentially. So if you can't figure out the product and the killer feature right now, then you need to go back up to the problem customer statement because you haven't figured that out. And then finally, if you can figure out those first two pairs, then you figure out what the revenue stream is, right? And we try to do this very, very sequentially through the Founder Institute and with a lot of the companies that we work with. Because if you can't figure any of those things out, or maybe you fail at the second part, or you fail at the revenue stream, right? Then you need to work backwards and see where you tripped up. And sometimes it does mean going all the way to the beginning, because sometimes it means if you can't figure out the revenue stream, maybe that problem you were trying to solve just wasn't important enough to begin with, right? But this is the method to figure this out, because at the end of the day, it gives you the organic growth that you need as a startup to stick out from all the other startups, and especially in today's funding market, to drive the metrics that you need to show investors that you have the ability to go global, that you have the ability to build a great audience, and that you really have figured out a good product market fit. And I bring up the metrics because I know that a lot of people here in attendance, they want to go global, and that typically means attracting international investors. And the last couple of years in investment have just been crazy. It's been an absolute bubble, not normal at all. The good news, I think, for a lot of early stage founders is that most of the news that you read about the funding market being really, really terrible and challenging, it's at the later stages, right? It's the companies that raise at insane valuations these last couple of years. And a lot of these statistics have come out and has validated what we've been saying for the last year or so, is that the earlier you are, basically the more shielded you will be from some of those funding impacts. But at the same time, there's a lot less FOMO in investing, fear of missing out. It is a lot more basically just sensible investing. All right. They're going to be looking for metrics. And we see a lot of startups. We see multiple term sheets per week here at the Founder Institute. So on fi.co/benchmarks, you can go to the website. We just start to publish like, hey, these are the things that we're seeing are required right now for these kinds of funding rounds across the world. And a lot of the time we'll say, okay, well, this is the traction, right? Is what you need, and that's traction rules. And traction can mean a lot of different things for different kinds of businesses, right? So we also go through not just the metrics that we're seeing are required and kind of the deal sizes and things like that across these early stages, but just what are some of the metrics that some of the investors are going to be looking for in order to fund companies at those kinds of rounds. So the rule of one is all about simplicity. As you're building out a business, it's a blank canvas. There's a million different directions that you can go. And I've seen it ruin many of company. I've been part of failed companies as well, where when I look back, this is why we failed. And so it's my parting advice to you is, you know, try to follow the rule of one, but even if you don't follow that, just keep in mind that every single thing that you're doing, simplicity will win. It will help you get funding. It will help you build something sustainable, and it will help you break out and build an international and enduring business. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jonathan, for that presentation. Could we get a big round of applause for Jonathan? Thank you very much.